Thank you very much for having us here today. Today, we're going to present our post-incident analysis report about the Brook Hollow apartment fire. Today with me, I have a couple of the members of the team. First, Vernon Champlin. I have Brian Nelson right here, and Scott Rickenham. We're four of the total of 9 of us that worked on this analysis. All right, so today I'm going to run you through just a high level of our approach and our assignment and approach to this PIA. We're going to give a little bit of the report outline, which you have. We're going to review the incident, and we're going to review the incident analysis and recommendations agency by agency. We're going to talk a little bit about key findings, and then talk about how we move forward as a public safety system. So first of all, why are we here? We're here because of the Brook Hollow apartment fire, which occurred on October 13th, 2023. That tragically took the life of Ms. Paoli Badeschi, but it also injured several other occupants and could have harmed many others, including first responders. So our assignment was a thorough evaluation of the public safety system that responded to this fire, to understand, first of all, their policies and procedures and those meeting, exceeding, and how do they compare with other jurisdictions, as well as looking specifically at these agencies, how they performed on this incident and how their actions may have affected the incident outcome. And finally, our task was to identify a strategy and create a plan to improve the outcomes of the public safety system as a whole, to restore public trust and confidence. Our report that you have identifies overarching themes and gaps in administrative operational processes, as well as where the agencies and policies and procedures are considered adequate as well. Right? So this is not just pointing out where it doesn't work, but where it is, where it does work. For all the agencies involved, we analyzed a number of documents here on the left-hand side of the screen, policies and procedures, organizational frameworks, of, again, all the public agencies involved, which were the Wichita Fire Department, the Wichita Police Department, Sedgwick County Emergency Communications, as well as Sedgwick County EMS. We went and also looked at the building code and looking at was the building constructed correctly at the time of construction. We also looked at actions that were taken before the incident as well, that may have impacted the incident itself. We conducted 2 site visits and a number of follow-up interviews and phone calls with all of the agencies and all the entities you see here on the right-hand side of the screen. There's, of course, limitations to any analysis. We relied on the available information and data that we were provided. We stand behind the findings that we present to you in this report. We believe we collected them with discretion, investigative diligence, and professional respect. Our findings, of course, are subject to change if additional relevant and factual information is provided. I will say that through the assistance of Dante Martin and Rusty Leeds at the county and Dante Martin here at the city, they were our liaisons to this, and anything we asked for, they got us access to. And if we weren't given the information, we were told why it didn't exist, essentially. So we don't expect additional information. Report structure itself goes into the background of all the agencies, just for record. It then goes and talks about the incident overview itself. We then, like I mentioned, go through in the report agency by agency, the analysis of the actions that they took. We look and review their SOGs and SOPs, and we find recommendations for each agency to improve. Finally, the moving forward section is our conclusions. It provides a path forward for this public safety system to improve its response to citizens of Wichita as well as the county itself. And then there's a number of appendices at the back of the report. We're going to get into the incident next, but first, we want to remind, as we talk about this in detail, we want to remind everyone about what is the Brook Hollow apartment complex, how is it laid out. That will play into some of the challenges that all the public safety agencies found when they're responding to this fire. So the Brook Hollow apartment complex was at 8165 East Central. It has a single vehicle entry and exit in the northeast corner to the complex. The complex itself, the apartment building itself, is comprised of 12 two-story buildings. They're garden-style apartments, so 2 above grade and 1 half below grade being the garden apartment. And there's approximately 72 units in the complex. I will point, before moving on from this slide, that there is a wood fence that surrounds the entire north, west, and south of this property. The only opening in the fence is to the northwest, where there's a person-size opening to allow people to go to the north. But other than that, the only vehicle access in and out of this complex is to the northeast. On the morning of October 13, 2023, there was a very strong wind coming out of the west-northwest. Focus here on building 300 because that's where the fire occurred, which is in the northwest corner of the apartment complex. So building 300 is comprised of 6 units, about 580 square feet each. They're all single bedroom units in this building, 2 per floor, like we mentioned. Every unit is provided with an ABC dry chemical fire extinguisher by the property management, as well as a working smoke alarm. The fire alarm, there is no fire alarm system. There was no fire alarm system at the building, like automatic fire alarm system at the building at the time of the fire, and there was not one required. We did, as I mentioned, MABCD gave us access to the original building permit and the original building drawings. They had that information, and building was constructed in 1977, likely constructed to this 1973 or 1976 Uniform Building Code. And we found that the building was constructed to code at the time of construction, both fire and building code. If constructed today, sort of a side note, Wichita would require sprinklers inside the building. However, this fire started technically outside of the inhabited portion of the building. Now we're going to get into a narrative of the incident. So at about 3:58 a.m., Ms. Paoli Badesky calls 911. She tells the call taker and dispatcher that her apartment is on fire, that she lives at the Brook Hollow Apartments. She's unsure of the building address, but she's in Unit 306 and provides her name. Ms. Badesky asks for help. 48 seconds later, there is not another word, discernible word coming from that phone call to 911. Within a minute of the phone call starting, the Wichita Fire Department is dispatched by Sedgwick County Emergency Communications Dispatch. A minute later, the residents in Unit 304, right below Unit 306, where Ms. Badesky is, they report the fire as well. At 4:15, the engine 15, who's already out of the station, coming down Rock Road, requests a second alarm. They tell us they can see the fire coming down Rock Road. At about that same time, when they're requesting that second alarm for the first time, Ms. Badesky, her 911 call ends. I think it's important to note that before any fire companies are on the scene, 2 residents from Unit 304 and 2 residents from Unit 305 jump from their respective windows to self-evacuate and save themselves. 1 resident from Unit 303 runs down the exterior stairs through the fire, and one resident from Unit 301 escapes through their front door, which is at garden level. And that happens all before the fire department's on scene, so they don't know that. At about 4:03, Engine 15 and Squad 15 are on the scene. They report heavy fire from the 2nd floor. They start a fire attack and search operation. A couple minutes later, Battalion 3 takes command. there's a call from a friend of the resident in Unit 302, which is the garden unit on the right side here in this pictogram, which would be the northwest corner, says that that resident cannot self-evacuate. Over several minutes, additional fire companies arrive. Dispatch at 407 reports on the radio that, on the ops radio, that a person is trapped in Unit 302. Medic 2, Sedgwick County Emergency, their EMS, Medic 2 hears that and responds, says, I'm responding, and send two ambulances with me. So the fire department is reporting that fire is in front of the units 304, 303, 305, 306, so that at the stairway landing, inside the interior or the exterior exit stairway. Portions of that stairway, a couple minutes, so this is a few minutes after the fire department arrives, about 4:10 to 4:13. Portions of that stairway roof collapse on Engine 15 and Squad 15. They transmit a mayday over the radio. Command reports everyone out and that they're going into a defensive operational mode. Residents in Unit 302 is evacuated by Squad 14 and Tower 3 as the stairway is collapsing. So the stairway starts to come down. They're actually coming out the doorway of 302. They have embers coming down. They take a step back, they pause, let things settle, and then get that resident of 302 out. At that time, or during that time, the incident command conducts a personal accountability report, which is required as what you would do, especially with a Mayday, making sure you have all your firefighters accounted for. At about 4:20, the Emergency Communication Center at Sedgwick County finally transmits that second alarm that was requested before. 4:21, fire companies realized that they hadn't finished checking the top floor of this building, and they go back to check the top floor, which had not been searched before that stair collapse in Mayday. So in this 4:21 to 4:24 timeframe, Rescue 2 breaks the bedroom window, which the upper right window in Unit 306, and 3 firefighters enter the bedroom. They find smoky and hot conditions to the floor. But after searching the bedroom, they don't find anything, so they continue. 2 firefighters move into the living room area and continue search. Rescue 2 firefighters searching identifies a bathroom, and in that bathroom, he finds a victim in the bathtub. 3 firefighters work to get that victim out of the bathroom, back into the bedroom, and out the window to a firefighter on Engine 10 who's at the top of the ladder ready to receive the victim. Once down the ladder, Engine 10 starts CPR on the patient, which is Ms. Badesky, at about 4:26 a.m. At about 4:34, SCEMS starts to transport their first patients they've received to the hospital, which is not Ms. Badesky yet. At 4:36, the fire investigator arrives on scene from Wichita. And about 4:32, SCMS is now connected with the Wichita Fire Department treating Ms. Badesky. So before that, it was just the Wichita Fire Department treating Ms. Badesky. In total, EMS triaged, treated, and transported up to 4 patients to the hospital, which included Ms. Badesky, who they transported starting at about 4:54 a.m. And they arrived at the hospital about 8 minutes later. SCEMS transported the last patient to the hospital just before 5 a.m. The investigators at this point, as the fire is contained and controlled, the fire investigators start to photograph the scene and document the scene. They leave the scene at about 10:10 in the morning, for the final time that day. And at about 11:05, Engine 15 was the last Wichita Fire Department unit on the scene, and they cleared the call. So at that point, there's no other fire department or apparatus or personnel on the scene, according to information we have. So this is an introduction to the analysis of each agency's actions. After a comprehensive review, Jensen Hughes found no single point of failure of any of the agencies involved that could solely be attributed to the fatality of Ms. Podesky. Instead, Jensen Hughes found a number of systematic shortcomings that, when combined, contribute to an unorganized rescue effort. Had these findings and shortcomings not occurred, it would have provided Ms. Podesky with a better chance of early rescue and subsequent increased potential for survival, provided she was still alive. The last known time that we know when she was alive was when she stopped speaking 48 seconds after she had her 911 call, 48 seconds after her 911 call was received, which occurred before the Wichita Fire Department was dispatched. Her call disconnected from 911 before Wichita Fire Department even arrived on scene. Jensen Hughes cannot conclude that the shortcomings that you're going to hear about today, and they're in this report that are identified, of the public safety system, we could not conclude that the shortcomings identified would have absolutely changed the outcome of this fatal incident. We're going to get into the emergency communications portion.
John. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having me here. I'm Brian Nelson. I'll be the technical liaison for Jensen Hughes, and we'll talk through some of the technical operations of the Sedgwick County Emergency Communications Center on the day of the incident. First of all, let me talk a little bit about the dispatch technology used at that facility. We in the industry consider them to be using best-of-breed systems. A couple of examples of that are the 911 phone and the radio system, our systems from Motorola. Everybody's heard of Motorola. Their CAD is a enterprise-grade system from Tyler Technologies, well known in our industry. And the voice recorders that are used to capture the audio that we hear are from NICE. So very, very good systems. SOPs and SOGs, we reviewed and compared those to the APCO and NENA standards. Those acronyms are listed at the bottom of that slide if you needed to know what those meant. And again, we looked at those at the time of the incident. We understand that there has been some updates and changes to some of those SOPs and SOGs since that time. They were thorough and well organized and up to date. As far as the training of the dispatchers, the Sedgwick County Emergency Communications Center operates in a call taker dispatch environment where a call taker generally triages the phone call from the 911 caller and passes that to the dispatcher for the response. To get to the level of being a dispatcher, it takes a couple of months of training, as you can see. To be the call taker, you start with a 4-week academy, and then they start on-the-job training. Once they complete their on-the-job training for their call taker duties, from 3 to 6 months, they start to train as dispatchers. And they first train to be fire dispatchers, and they call that dispatch level 1. After 9 to 12 months of total training, they become fully trained dispatchers that can work on all disciplines: police, fire, EMS, and dispatch. It's important to note that there was some concern about staff levels at the time of the incident. We do know that they were operating on minimum staffing. We will talk a little bit more about what that means as we continue here. But just as a note, it's noted that Sedgwick County has been aggressively looking to set higher pay raises, pay rates for employees, and have been trying to recruit and keep retention of employees. Some of the human factors as they relate to technology and operation. Ms. Podesky's 911 call was answered according to APCO standards within the time frame that's listed in the graph over to the right. Other 911 calls that came into the center were also handled and triaged appropriately according to APCO standards. Calls from Unit 304 and for the person calling on behalf of the resident in 302, again, were both answered within the standard benchmarks of the APCO standard that you see listed there. Moving to the audio recording, Ms. Badesky's 911 call audio recording was reviewed, and we do know that the call taker dispatcher indicated that he could not understand the apartment unit number that she provided and therefore did not provide this information to the Wichita Fire Department. Hearing and understanding speech are affected by many factors. We looked at age, genetics, environment, cognitive factors, language, and others. Jensen Hughes listened to the recording released, and we can hear and understand Ms. Badesky's provided Unit 306 twice. Now, as a technology liaison, I will have to note that the call recording comes from a different level of the call processing than what the dispatcher hears. And on the next slide, we're going to talk about the dual headset that we say that could be a contributing factor to not understanding that unit number. Okay, so again, to continue on with the hearing and understanding speech is also affected by the technology, the quality of the audio, the quality of the playback, and the device. Jensen Hughes can confirm that the recorded 911 call audio released from the SCCEC dispatch is of higher quality than what the call taker and dispatcher hears sitting on the console. We reviewed the technology and hardware associated with the live call taking, dispatching, recording, and playback. We determined, again, that the quality of the audio recording is pure, meaning digital, recorded from the carriers, and is captured prior to the hardware that's connected to the headset. We listened to live calls and listened to the recorded playback of those live calls. What can be heard in the recorded audio is not the same as what is heard on the headset. And we will refer to that as the back end, the differences in the back end recording. Additionally, there is a feature called Instant Recall that allows the call taker or dispatcher to play back the audio from the system in which it was provided. Unfortunately, it was not used in this incident. This could have allowed the unit number to be understood and relayed to the Wichita Fire Department. And again, this instant recall was available on the 911 phone system. Delay in dispatching the second alarm. John already mentioned the timeline of which the second alarm was called for and wasn't dispatched till many minutes later. We learned that the delay in the dispatching was a CAD issue, the computer-aided dispatch system that they used to provide that second alarm or provide the units to go to the second alarm. Several dispatchers and a supervisor were unsuccessful in assisting the dispatcher in dispatching the second request or the second alarm. Another dispatcher across the room overheard the conversation and was able to get the recommended fire unit recommendations to appear in CAD and then finally dispatch the alarm. This issue was brought to the attention of the SCEC administration later that morning, and they found that multiple dispatchers on multiple shifts could not recall how to do that dispatch in CAD. Within days of the incident, the administration arranged retraining for all staff members on this issue. Okay, and then the final technology challenge that we uncovered were the dual headsets. So the dispatchers and call takers in Sedgwick County Emergency Communications wear double headsets. And this is, I've been in public safety technology for 30 years, and we have not normally seen that. We don't see that in any other area or any other dispatch centers that I've witnessed before. So again, to reaffirm, listening and understanding to different sounds coming in from each ear, dichotic listening is what they call that, was thought to be one of the issues that created confusion for the dispatchers in this incident. So what we did is we sat down, the members of the Jensen Hughes team sat down at the dispatch consoles and listened to the dispatch, what the dispatchers hear. And we can concur that what we hear in the double headsets was very difficult and almost impossible to completely comprehend, both with preference to one ear seeming to always have given the what you can hear. Regardless, SCEC Dispatch has operated this way with the dual headsets for many years, and undoubtedly the call taker dispatchers have become better at dichotic listening through practice. And with that, we will turn it over to Vern for the fire portion.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council, Vernon Champlin, Jensen Hughes. This portion of the presentation, we're going to look at the Wichita Fire Department and their operational response related strategies and tactics of the incident. We started off this assessment by looking at policies and procedures. We evaluated Wichita Fire Department policies and procedures against NFPA standards and other department policies and procedures, as well as industry best practices. We found that the Wichita Fire Department's operational manual, which will be referred to as the OM, was thorough, well-organized, and up-to-date. However, we also found numerous operational policies that were not followed during this incident. This presentation is, it's difficult to give from an operational, fireground operational perspective in the fact that there's lots of layering of things going on simultaneously. And so in an attempt to separate that and kind of present it to you, we've identified these 5 areas, being deployment, water supply and fire attack, search and rescue, command and control, and then Mayday. And so although I'm going to speak to these kind of individually, you're going to hear some of the same comments maybe at different portions of the presentation because they are dual related. So NFPA 1710 is the internationally recognized standard regarding organizational deployment of fire suppression operations, emergency medical operations, and special operations to the public by career fire departments. There's 2 primary components in that standard in which we looked at, one being total response time and one being total effective response force. There are benchmarks associated with total response time regarding the first arriving engine time, the second arriving engine time, and then the total effective response force arrival time. Secondly, the total effective response force is made up of a number of firefighting personnel identified to complete critical task analysis on a fire ground based upon general hazard types. So regarding a garden level apartment, NFPA has identified minimum total, and I strongly say minimum, the minimum total effective response force as being 28 firefighters if an aerial device is response. In our assessment, we found that the Wichita Fire Department's response to this incident met the benchmark standards for response time for each of first, second arriving units as well as the total effective response force. And we found that the Wichita Fire Department assembled the total effective response force within the benchmark standard time, shown there in the tables. It's worthy to note that the Wichita Fire Department's deployment to this apartment structure fire is the same regardless of if it says trapped or not trapped, essentially. If a structure fire comes into a garden level apartment, the run card and the dispatch response to that is the same. Same number of personnel, same number of apparatus. Strategic priorities are set by the incident commander and associated tasks once they're on scene. That's to be determined by the incident commander once they arrive. Deployment, there's a lot of information here on this slide. I'll note the picture on the left is essentially our best culmination of data and information related to the actual incident scene where units were positioned. The black circles with the number in the center it's the arrival order in which those units arrived at scene. You'll also notice the green dotted line that John mentioned earlier that is a fence around the northwest and south sides. It's a 6-foot privacy fence. You'll also notice the hole cut in the fence by firefighters. There's also an opening in the northwest corner of the fence. You'll also note that there's a significant number of Wichita Fire Department apparatus on the north and northwest corner on the other side of the privacy fence. This is because the site condition itself is so restricted and limited inside the apartment complex boundary. And then finally, I'll point out, if you notice there at the apartment complex, there's the swimming pool. It's actually where the flag is located, the Google pin. Just to the east and a little bit north, you'll notice the fire hydrant location of a single fire hydrant located here within this property. So with that information, and we take it and apply it to this table on the right, you'll notice that there's essentially 4 columns across the top. The engine arrival, the truck rescue arrival, the squad arrival, and the BC and other unit arrival. It has the columns are further divided into the specific unit and then the arrival time. And you'll notice next to the unit there's a number in parentheses. That's the number of personnel on that apparatus. It's important to note that there was actually the 7th unit on scene is actually the first unit to establish command. The operations manual references initial incident command as well as incident command. And in this particular case, it was actually the 7th arriving unit before somebody actually took command of the scene. You'll also notice that following the 10th arriving unit, there's a total number of 28 firefighters on scene. The reason that's important is back to that total effective response force. So there at 28 firefighters were on scene in 6 minutes from the dispatch time. And I think I'm very comfortable in telling you that from a national perspective, 28 firefighters on scene is a very, very good response time for that number of people. It's a very strong response. You'll also notice that when the second alarm was in fact dispatched between rows 17 and 18, there were actually 41 firefighters on scene, well beyond the minimum standard of 28 by the time the dispatch the second alarm was dispatched. After deployment, we'll talk about water supply. This wood frame, non-sprinklered, high-density residential unit is served by a dead-end water main with 1 fire hydrant on a dead-end road. These conditions alone warrant extensive pre-planning. However, the Wichita Fire Department's provided pre-plan is weak. The first arriving engine did not lay a supply line per the operations manual, thus requiring others to hand jack large diameter hose, a time-consuming process. The operations manual directs the second arriving engine to not stage and immediately establish a water supply. However, the second engine 9 arrived and staged at a hydrant on Central. And engine 14, the third arriving engine, actually initiated the water supply plan. Engine 14 first attempted to access from the west and was met with the privacy fence. So they went around to the north and came in the dead-end road and attempted to take the hydrant within the complex. However, Truck 5 had parked in front of it. Truck 5 was deploying their outriggers, and they were directed by engine 14 to reposition, thus causing additional water supply delays. The initial crews deployed 3 attack lines, 2 2.5-inch lines, and a single 1 3/4 line simultaneously from engine 15's 600-gallon tank without a continuous water supply being established. Fire suppression was stalled and crews were put at risk when engine 15 ran out of tank water. Firefighters were in the stairwell without water when the roof partially collapsed and the mayday was transmitted. The rapid advancement up the stairwell suggests that the crews were operating in fast attack rescue mode, which is an option within the operations manual, despite the fact that the fire attack mode was declared by Squad 15, which actually requires an IRIC or a RIC per the operations manual. Continuous water supply was eventually established from the on-site hydrant by engine 14. The chosen approaches to water supply and fire attack impacted the timing in which the victim may have been removed from her apartment. Recommendations: consider limiting the number and size of hand lines permitted to flow water from a booster tank before a water supply is established. I also want to take a second here to apologize that I'm reading this to you. As you know, we presented this information to the county this morning, and out of respect for the city of Wichita, I read these notes so that not to go off on additional items, and so I'm reading them equally the same to you. So I know that we were all taught in school that's not a great way to present, but I'm doing it on purpose. We'll move on now to search and rescue. Per the operations manual, searches should generally begin closest to the fire area and work back from there. Let me say this, firefighters are trained to save lives, and they should do this regardless of what dispatch says or relying on what a panicked civilian says. Interviews with the Wichita Fire Department confirmed that firefighters knew there was a high life hazard on floors above the first floor when they arrived. Given the time of day, they assumed that the apartment was occupied until it was confirmed not to be occupied. With a single way in and out from a single stair tower, vent enter search, or otherwise known as VES, is an effective method to conduct quick searches per the operations manual. But there is no indication that VES occurred anywhere, and especially not nearest the fire. First 911 caller was Miss Badesky in Unit 306. And it's important to note that despite what some of the news media has said, that she did not report she was trapped. She actually asked for help. I know that's a difference in terminology, but there's actually, that terminology means something in the dispatch policies too, the difference between asking for help and saying you're trapped. Approximately 3 minutes after Wichita Fire arrived on scene, Sedgwick County Emergency Communication announced over the opera channel that one person was trapped, and that was reported in by a person in Unit 302. Some fire companies arrived and self-assigned or were directed by the command to search uninvolved buildings before crews completed the search of Building 300, where the fire was located. During interviews, those crews stated that they believed other crews were searching Building 300. You may want to flip back to your site map. I'll try to explain Building 300. To the east of it is Building 200 and 1200. To the south of it is Building 400 and 1100. Through reviewing reports and radio communications, we had confirmation crews were in fact searching Building 200 and 400, and there was reports of crews searching the backside. Unsure in our analysis what the backside means, but we assume it was probably Building 1100 and 1200. So if you look at your map, that'll make more sense. Per the operations manual, during a mayday, no fireground assignment should be abandoned. The incident commander is responsible and will direct and or redirect operations. It is reasonable to assume that the incident commander would need some time to gain control of the situation and to start working through the Mayday checklist. And I didn't go into it in this presentation here, but the operations manual is pretty specific on assigning resources to deal with both incidents simultaneously. Search and rescue was eventually reprioritized after the Mayday was stabilized, and the primary search was completed for the remainder of Building 300, including Units 305 and 306. Ms. Badesky was found unresponsive in 306 by Rescue 2 and brought down by Engine 10. Since Sedgwick County EMS is not automatically assigned to a structure fire response unless someone is reported trapped, Wichita Fire must be prepared to triage and treat victims until they can be transferred to EMS. Recommendations here, searches should begin closest to the area of fire per the operations manual. An immediate arrival of truck companies to a residential structure fire should employ prioritized search and rescue as an immediate action of opportunity that targets a known or high probability area of a trapped subject, and that's out of the operations manual. Now to command and control. Command and control of an apartment fire involves the organized management and coordination of firefighting efforts through the incident command system. This is a national system, which defines a clear hierarchy of the chain of command. It begins with a size up, where the incident commander conducts an initial assessment of the situation to gauge the fire's extent, identify potential hazards, and understand the building's layout. Effective resource management is critical, as personnel and equipment must be allocated appropriately with priority tasks assigned to firefighters and coordination with additional emergency response services. Once on the scene, the incident commander determines the incident strategy, which may include coordinated ventilation, fire attack, and search and rescue priorities. The first arriving units did not assume command, as they engaged in fast attack search mode, which is permitted by the operational manual. However, as additional units arrived on scene, no one had established initial command. 6 units were actually on scene before command was eventually established by the 7th arriving unit, which is Battalion 3. Communication between incident command and fireground operations is essential to communicate those incident priorities. Once interior searches were underway, neither an initial rapid intervention crew nor a rapid intervention crew was formally established as required by the operations manual. Incident commander's action or inaction can have a significant impact on the outcome of any incident. In this incident, command was not well organized and appeared to be more reactive than proactive. 5 examples of deficient command and control actions at this incident include directing an engine that was staged at a contingency water supply per the OM to reposition and search an uninvolved building, number 200. Numerous units were allowed to freelance without a clear assignment or incident coordination. This is how we ended up with people on the backside, quote, on backside of the building. Allowing companies to search uninvolved buildings before the high priority area closest to the fire. When the mayday occurred, the operation was switched to defensive, pulling all fireground, both fire attack and search and rescue operations out of the building to focus on the mayday. Deprioritized search operations and did not manage the mayday and TAC radio communications in accordance with the operations manual. Did not broadcast critical fire incident benchmarks. One way that incident command kind of controls the management of an incident is through the use of benchmarking. Those benchmarks include things like water supply established, primary search complete, secondary search complete, fire under control. Were not communicated over the radio per the OM. Recommendations include things like examine recent fire incidents to determine if incident command is typically effective. This was a one-off. Failure to communicate fire scene benchmarks results in the lack of adequate fireground management. Announce incident benchmarks to the dispatcher via the ops channel. Speak a little bit about the mayday. And maydays are fairly close to everybody in the fire services. Mayday is how we take care of our own. Mayday training and procedures, and it's how we care for our own. A mayday is an emergency incident occurring within an emergency incident. It represents the critical moment when a firefighter is in distress and requires assistance due to life-threatening circumstances. Mayday must be treated with the same level of priority and structured response as the initial incident. A dual focus is necessary to manage the mayday while maintaining the ongoing incident, ensuring a comprehensive response to both challenges. When the mayday occurred, there was no initial rapid intervention crew or rapid intervention crew formally established. Incident command did not upgrade the alarm when the mayday occurred, as required per the OM. There was no direction from command regarding if the mayday incident was to remain on the TAC channel and other units were to change channels per the OM, which resulted in numerous times of other units walking on the emergency radio traffic of the mayday. Command did not provide status updates as the incident progressed on the ops channel, nor did command announce when the mayday was complete, as required by the OM. The handling of the mayday impacted the timing in which the victim may have been able to be removed from her apartment. Although the mayday was quickly resolved, there is evidence that managing a mayday is not well practiced within the Wichita Fire Department incident command structure or firefighters. We interviewed Wichita Fire Department firefighters associated with this incident. It revealed that most could not recall the last time a multi-company Mayday training was completed. Many referenced their training academy, their initial hire training academy. Recommendation, conduct Mayday training, but not just simple Mayday training, but design complex training scenarios that include multi-company operations with search and rescue, fire suppression, and rescue operations being conducted when the simulated Mayday occurs. Here we're going to move into a slide outside of my initial 5. This is the fire cause and origin investigation. And although the actual cause and origin investigation was not part of the initial response, which is our primary focus, it essentially is part of the ongoing incident. And so there's a few items here we'll share. Jensen Hughes was provided with limited information regarding the investigation. Findings and recommendations should be considered as complete as possible at this time. However, the FIU, which is the Fire Investigations Unit, noted the origin to be exterior stairwell of Building 300 in and around the landing of Units 303 and 304, and the cause of the fire remains under investigation. So without a determinant, that could possibly limit the amount of information they provided us, and so our information, again, is limited. However, with the information we did receive, a few photos, some correspondence, our assessment questions the FIU's adequate training and performance of investigations in accordance with internationally accepted practices of NFPA 921 and 1033. 5 examples of inadequacies that we notice include: scene photography is not systematic or complete. Evidence sent for testing did not include control samples. Photographs of samples tested were not in context or exact location taken. No scene diagram was provided. There was lacking supplemental reports on follow-up investigation activities. Origin and cause investigation reports should have been completed by now, even if undetermined, with discussion of competing cause hypothesis. I will share one of my bigger concerns is that this incident was a civilian fatality and included a firefighter Mayday event. The fire investigation unit left the scene approximately 45 minutes prior to engine 15 clearing the scene. I would consider that not industry best practice or normal. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to John to take you through the last few slides.
On to Sedgwick County EMS. Sedgwick County EMS provided triage, treatment, and transport of up to 4 patients, as I mentioned before. The first arriving units on scene did have a difficult time identifying an area to access the scene. As we've talked about, there's one way in and one way out, and a difficult time identifying victims. This was primarily due to, like I mentioned, limited vehicle access, but also the EMS not being dispatched to fires unless there is a report of someone trapped. So they're aware of the fire, to be clear. They're aware of the fire, and the EMS district chief is supposed to listen to the radio to decide if they want to go on their own. And once someone's reported as trapped, that's when, on a structure fire, that's when they get automatically dispatched. Additionally, the triage area was either not set up or not communicated. So there's radio traffic where the police are asking dispatch to ask EMS, where should we send patients? And EMS says, we're not even there yet. I don't know. So the police send everyone to the incident command, which was a fair decision at that time. But we don't know that there was a triage area set up to focus patients. All of this put EMS at a disadvantage. Luckily, the district chief was listening like he was supposed to radio traffic, and he did self-dispatch himself and 2 other medic units, shortening their response time. So they were dispatched, but he actually preempted that and got everyone moving quicker. I think it's important to note here that NFPA 1710 will bring this up again. For a full alarm assignment on an apartment fire, it does require a medical care component that is at least 2 members capable of providing on-scene medical support. So that's help. But it also requires someone to be able to transport them. So currently, the policies and procedures on these fires are not complying with NFPA 1710 with providing EMS as a first due assignment. And that is a strong recommendation that SCEMS provide an ambulance on fires where there is high life safety risk, specifically as examples, apartment fires or high-rise fires. Moving on to the Wichita Police Department. The police department is also not automatically due on structure fires like Brook Hollow. They're made aware of a standard structure fire response. Police department played a relatively small but a good role on the incident when they were called. They were called to assist with a belligerent individual. They assisted, as I understand, with a little traffic management, which is typically what they do when they're called to these scenes. And they did assist the FIU, the Fire Investigation Unit of the fire department, interviewing incident victims, both, I think, on the scene and at the hospital. But we believe this is a missed opportunity. The police department, they're on patrol 24 hours a day. They're out on the street every day, all the time. They have specific geographic areas in which they're responsible for. They know everything about their patrol area. If they were due on reported structure fires, maybe not all of them, but certain ones, with proper training, they could offer initial size up. They could tell the fire department through dispatch, oh yeah, I see the orange stuff. I can respond, keep coming. Or I don't see anything. That doesn't mean the fire department doesn't keep coming, but some additional information before the fire department gets there from the police department could be helpful. They could continue with traffic control, scene safety, make sure the fire department can get to the scene safely and control the scene. They could assist with alerting occupants of danger, right? So the Wichita Police Department, with proper training, could be clearing people away from the IDLH atmosphere, the area that's immediately dangerous to life and health, which is where the fire department should be operating. They could be clearing other apartment areas while the fire department is focused on what their gear is made for and making those rescues. The police department could identify potential witnesses and make other critical observations in case the incident did become a potential criminal matter. Strong recommendation of ours is that the WPD and the WFD work together to develop policies and procedures so that the police can properly assist on fire scenes, and they can actually look at the International Association of Chiefs of Police model policy, the law enforcement for fire response model document, as an example. It's a very simple 2-page document, and it provides really good guidance on specific ways the police can assist the fire department in responding to those emergencies. Also, equally important, the policy outlines specific actions police officers should not take when working the scene of a structure fire. To our key findings. So number 1, Jensen Hughes believes that Sedgwick County Emergency Communications caller dispatcher could not understand what Ms. Badesky was saying when she stated her apartment and unit number. However, the dispatcher also did not use the instant recall feature available to replay the audio. Had he done that, it may have allowed him to better understand what she was saying, and then he would have been able to relay that information to the Wichita Fire Department. Number 2, the Sedgwick County Emergency Communications dispatched the requested second alarm after a significant delay. However, we found that the fire department had an adequate number of firefighters on scene to conduct fireground operations of a garden-style apartment before that second alarm was dispatched. Number 3, we found the Wichita Fire Department's decisions associated with initial attack, an uncoordinated search and rescue effort, ineffective command and control, in addition to the unfortunate partial collapse of the stairway and subsequent mayday, delayed search efforts. Now, in our evaluation, we've been highly focused on what the agencies did and did not do and how that may have affected the timing in which the search occurred to potentially increase the chance of Ms. Badesky's being rescued and maybe survive. But we cannot ignore factors that are outside of all the public safety agencies because these were also pretty critical factors. The first is that there was past evidence of inappropriately discarded smoking materials in and around Building 300's exit stairway prior to this fire. It was a problem there. This exit stairway itself, its combustible construction, its geometry, the wind conditions the morning of the fire were significant factors that played into the outcome of this incident. We found evidence on Ms. Badesky's social media in the weeks leading up to the fire that a smoke alarm in her apartment had a low battery. We don't know if that detector was working properly at the time of the incident. We also don't know if she replaced that battery minutes after posting that video. In reviewing the available fire scene photographs provided by the Wichita Fire Department Fire Investigation Unit, specifically looking at patterns of fire impingement on the exterior doors and the damage to the insides of the apartment units. The door, we look at those photos and we see that it seems like the unit of door 306 may have been open or opened at some point during a portion of this incident, where other apartment unit doors remain closed. And that's by looking at the photographs that we've been given from the Fire Investigation Unit. If that door is open longer than anyone else's, then that makes that environment inside that unit a much more difficult environment to survive. We do not know how the door, if it opened, how it opened, when it opened. Damage inside that apartment and the damage to the door is different than the damage inside the other apartments and the damage to their doors if they were opened. Ms. Badesky's decision to retreat to her windowless bathroom is a contributing factor to her fatality. If we look at fire exposure to the adjacent apartment, Unit 305, the wind was blowing everything to Unit 305. That was a much more severe exposure than to the Unit 306. And despite that, those residents survived. They were injured, but how did they survive? They found their way to the front bedroom and they jumped from the window prior to the arrival of the fire department. How do we move forward? It's important to state that, we've been asked to and have taken a microscope to a post-incident. That's what you've asked for. And so we're looking at this with a microscope, with a magnifying glass. We first have to say that we believe that everyone involved in the public safety agencies had the best intent. There was no malintent here. Everyone did the best they could at that time. However, we still find there's opportunities for improvement. Every public safety agency involved in this, we have recommendations for in this report. We have not gone through all of those. We would be here for a lot longer. But every public safety agency had a role in providing a better incident response to this. Before we can work on those things, we need to work on some underlying challenges. The path forward with Sedgwick County, the city of Wichita, and the other local public safety agencies is putting aside differences, working together to develop working in strong, trusting relationship and rebuild the trust of the citizens that you all serve. There have been long-standing tensions and animosity, like going back decades, between Sedgwick County Emergency Communications and some of the agencies it serve, undermining the trust and respect of everyone involved. To foster a stronger working relationship and better serve the county and the city, you have to move past those grievances. real imagined focus on building a better foundation and mutual understanding and trust. Trust that everyone is doing the best they can rather than assuming that they're not. Public safety system services thrive when there's collaboration between neighboring agencies, driving improvement and innovation. However, in the case of Wichita Fire and Police, as well as Sedgwick County Emergency Communications and their EMS department, the lack of nearby comparable advancing agencies fosters complacency. You know, Wichita and Sedgwick County is geographically isolated. You're the big dogs here. Geographic isolation, these agencies must intentionally seek out professional relationships elsewhere that will contribute to improved service delivery. So outside this area, go well beyond this area to find out what other people are doing and see if it's if your system could learn something from those systems. A recommendation is that this public safety system should seek out benchmarking from other similar systems around the country and potentially accreditation of these different public safety systems as methods to continuously evaluate itself against similar systems. Finally, the fire department culture and accountability. The fire department appears to lack emphasis on self-reflection and accountability within its culture. By fostering a culture rooted in humility, collaboration, and continuous improvement, the department can enhance its services and strengthen its ability to meet the city's needs effectively. With that, we will take questions.
Thank you very much to the team at Jensen Hughes for the report. Council members, do you have questions? Vice Mayor Ballard.
Thank you. Well, I have a whole bunch, but I'll just ask a couple. So the idea that Paoli didn't say the word trapped changed the whole chain of commands of how it should have gone. I don't know that if I was in that situation, I would know to say trapped, but is that why medical wasn't dispatched?
So the word trapped in dispatching has a specific meaning, and the call taker dispatcher has to discern whether or not they believe someone is trapped or not trapped. When Unit 302, the friend of Unit 302 did not say trap, but they said they cannot get out themselves, and so the dispatcher or call taker decided that was trapped, and that's what initiated EMS response, rather than just monitoring in the background. So to your answer, all takers, dispatchers have to determine whether someone is trapped or not. To juxtapose that, in Unit 304 occupants called and said, hey, there's a fire, there's a lot of commotion in the background, and then their phone line went dead just like Paoli's. They had an open phone line just like Paoli did, but they jumped out the window. The dispatcher didn't know that. They continued to ask what was going on, and they didn't get a response, just like Paoli. So they don't know. They have to use context clues to try to determine if someone is trapped or not, if they're not using that word specifically.
Madam Mayor, Vernon Champlin, I appreciate your question, but I also want to make sure that doesn't become a rabbit hole. The reality is the operations manual indicates that fireground operations should focus on areas that are most immediately dangerous to life and health. It's the reason that fireground strategy and tactics are not determined and communicated from the dispatch center to the responders. The responders determine fireground priorities in accordance with their policies and procedures, and the incident command, whether that's initial or established, they prioritize that and put resources to that. I can tell you, and every firefighter will tell you, dispatch information is just dispatch information. We never buy or sell the farm on dispatch information. It's additional information that's taken into consideration, yes, and we always appreciate it when it's accurate. but arguably it's as inaccurate as often as it is accurate. So that's why the policy is specific to say, and this is not a policy just specific to Wichita, this is consistent policies across the country. The fireground resources regarding search and rescue and prioritization of incident strategies and tactics occur by the incident commander on the scene.
Okay, thank you for that. Why would you not, or when does the playback option, you said they chose, or it wasn't done in this situation, what would trigger someone to do the playback? Is that something you do on every call, or please help me understand that?
Yeah, no, not on every call. I mean, if you don't hear something and know that technology is available to you, you would certainly, I would think, rely on that. I am, again, a technology person, not a dispatcher. I never sat in the seat. Scott, I don't know if that's a cue for you to come up here and kind of suggest what you would do.
Yeah,
in that
and
situation.
we had pretty much that same question from the county. As someone who sat in that seat, if someone was giving me information and I did not understand that information, could not hear that information, I would use my playback at that point until I could understand that information.
So I would say you don't know what you don't hear if you don't
Correct.
know.
Right.
So I was just curious about, some of them heard the 306, some of them did not, correct? From what I understand?
The phone call, the call taker said he did not hear it, could not understand it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last question is about training. It sounds like there's a lot of training that I'll just speak to the fire department that we are really lacking. I would hope that there's a lot of training that we are up to date on, but does it appear that there is a significant amount of training that we are behind on?
In all honesty, I looked at one incident, and so it's hard for me to make a general statement across fire department training. But I will tell you that in the analysis of the fireground operations, one, so many policies were not followed. So many important fireground command and control functions that are baseline were freelance, distracted, not well communicated. I also have to question just the local culture, not just on the fire department, but across the board of emergency services. The basic professional fireground communications regarding radio traffic, words and methodologies beyond even just the benchmarking, but there's just such basic conversations of unit identification and things that we are all trained on as, hey, you, it's me types of methodology of communication on the radio was not followed. So I give those examples not to say that fire department training in general is lacking, but fire department training at this incident didn't distinguish itself as impressive.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys for all your work on this. I appreciate an outside look. A couple of quick questions here. When you're talking about the headsets and how there's a dual headset, what is the purpose for the dual headset?
So in Sedgwick County Emergency Communication Center, they utilize two headsets, one headset for the 911 phone system and one headset for the radio system. There are some technology challenges in integrating headsets from these very different systems, a radio system and a phone system. In my experience in public safety in many areas in the country, I have not seen a dual headset operation. That doesn't mean it doesn't work, but we did see that there could be some issues with that amount of different information coming in, both sides of your head.
Okay, so it's one ear is from one.
One ear is your 911 phone, call taker, and you have a microphone on that, and so you're speaking to the caller, listening to the caller in one ear, and out the other ear, you're listening to the radio traffic from the first responders, and you're giving them traffic through their microphone. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Okay, and that can be integrated into one headset?
Yes, that can be integrated into one.
Where there
And
be
it's
audio?
seen-
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Would there be audio improvements if it went into one, or is that something we just have to deal with and it's just clearer when we play the tape back?
Now, to the context of improving the audio from the carrier, the radio, to the headset, there are still some technology challenges in there. There's still some analog to digital conversions that happen in there that can, change the tone of the radio or the phone call. It's not a magic situation to fix everything, but it does cut down on the confusion that human has in front of them with all that information, and makes it easier for them to understand a single thing that's happening. And they're not missing traffic. So what happens is the headset becomes active on the communication that the dispatcher is trying to listen to or communicate on or talk. When they switch to the other one, a speaker is presented in front of them, just a standalone speaker where they can hear what's called select audio, which is the radio traffic that they can still kind of listen to in the background, but it's not their focal attention. When they need to focus in on the caller, they can focus in on the caller. When they need to focus in on the radio traffic or the response, they can focus in on that.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up.
And one thing that will help with that, even if they continue the dual headset, they are working towards, and have been for some time, with piecing out call takers only. So that beginning dispatcher is a call taker. So they have a separate group of call takers. So all they do is take phone calls. So they have that single headset that they are listening to. The dispatchers then would still have that dual headset. And if all of those call takers were busy, those calls would then present to a dispatcher, and one of those who was not busy would take that call. So that will help if they get that program, completely up and working,
Okay,
which they're working to.
Thank you. On the Mayday, what is the standard operating procedure for that? What did we, because it says that during a Mayday, you start treating them, the fallen firefighters, just like somebody who got called in. It's like the original response.
Yeah, so, and I'm just referring to the Wichita Fire Department Operations Manual off the top of my head now, but there's a clear policy, and that some of that policy indicates that the incident commander should assign somebody to manage that Mayday, so that essentially has its own incident commander, okay? There's a component of the policy that upgrades the alarm to get additional resources. At this particular incident, that was a fairly quickly resolved minor Mayday, but something that was extremely complex, could require additional resources. There's also a component of the policy that talks about whether or not fireground operation communication switches to another channel so that the person that's in the trapped or severe condition may not be able to change their channel. They can have a direct line of communication with the incident commander assigned to the Mayday portion. So there's a lot of components there that did not happen. One of the bigger concerns is even when the Mayday resolved itself, there was no communication broadcast that the Mayday is over and we are doing something else. The operation just kind of continued to expand, and through interviews we found that as people kind of looked around, there was people just kind of re-engaging in the offensive fire operation, but there was no real transition. Also, I guess if I take a step back, the component of going 100% defensive, pulling all operations out of the initial incident, and then establishing a PAR, which is the Personal Accountability Report. The PAR itself took about 10 minutes, where the incident commander checked with every unit on the fire ground, including those units on the backside, right, checking on everybody. But vital time was passed by, and we didn't operate both those incidents simultaneously. We stopped one and did the other, and took our eyes off the primary ball. Even though the Mayday is a primary ball too, we stopped the initial operation for the Mayday.
Okay, and that Mayday standard operating procedure, that's in line with the national recommendations.
Yeah, Mayday has been a conversation in the fire service for a number of years now. Wichita Fire, not unlike every major metropolitan fire department, has a Mayday policy, and at some level there's Mayday training. I have not been, I haven't taken the deep dive into the training division and what that looks like. My comment earlier was just some interview feedback that we heard from firefighters indicating they've done some single station or single apparatus drills, but not complex Mayday where you're maintaining fire suppression operations, conducting search and rescue operations. A Mayday occurs, multiple layered effects occurring at once.
Okay, just two other quick questions on the timeline. When did Battalion 3 get there? Because that's the one who essentially took command. when
That
it
was
got-
the 7th unit to arrive on scene, and I believe so to answer your question, they arrived at 04:05:21, which was about 5 minutes after the first dispatch.
5 minutes after
So-
the first call.
So that kind of goes back to the fact that even though there were 7 units on scene before incident command was established, those 7 units arrived very quickly. I don't remember if I told you all this or if it was to the group this morning, but having 7 units on scene in the first 6 minutes is very good. Like, that's a very good service. Where the service started to fall apart is that there was no strategic fireground prioritization occurring, and there was freelancing going on of people doing all kinds of things without a clear, defined objective to search rescue of the closest hazard.
Yeah, so that sounds like they were there maybe 2 minutes after the first responders got there, right around.
So engine 15 arrived on scene at 4, it's pretty small here on my 4:02. So yeah, 3 or 4 minutes after the first arriving.
Okay.
And I think that when I say that, it's even though the operations policy does allow for the first arriving pumper to engage in fast attack, right? That is accepted. What the policy doesn't do is allow 6 other units after that to arrive and not establish command.
Okay. Appreciate that. And EMS arrived at 4:32?
John, that's not on my list here.
Or right?
That's in
right
your
around-
front timeline.
Yeah, it's kind of
It's this
general on
one.
the timeline, so. Says 4:32.
Medic 2 responds at 4:18:16 with 2 more ambulances. They're on the scene at sorry, I apologize.
So at 4:07, dispatch reports trapped person in 302. Medic 2 hears this and responds and asks for 2 additional ambulances at 4:07. But I'm not sure.
4:18, I think, is when they were on scene.
Okay, all right, appreciate that.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, 4:18:16 is when we reported them as on scene.
All right, that's all I have.
And this timeline in the presentation here is a condensed versus what's in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. And I attended the presentation this morning, so a lot of my questions have been answered by my colleagues at the county and then today. But thank you for the presentation. And when we use Jensen Hughes for our police department, I think it's been very helpful. We've had good feedback from police, good feedback from the community. And I know we're going to have more questions, but City Manager Layton, if I can ask you a question, and tell me when I'm wrong, which is often, I know. But with the Wichita Police Department, after we received the report, we put together an implementation committee and then decided, next steps and how to move forward. It sounds like we did a lot of things well, both the county and the city, and there's some things also that can be improved, as with any situation. Do you have any thoughts, or a very initial, I know it's preliminary, but thoughts of next step? Because I think, when we're talking with community members, when people are going to start asking us questions, and they will, I would like to know kind of, where are we going to go from here and how are we going to use this rich information to make sure that we're just continuing to develop as a fire department and then also for the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember, that's a great question. We all just received the report today, so still formulating our thoughts. But I really see two levels of review and implementation. The first is the fire department itself. And we need to look at the recommendations, the observations, and then recommendations made by Jensen Hughes as they pertain to training, incident command, and some of the other issues that were listed for fire department. But then we also have to engage with our partners. So it's a little bit like what they did, that we've done with county before. We have to get together with the county and talk about the EMS portion of this, the dispatch portion of this, as well as talk to the police department. EMS and police department, partner agencies, small recommendations or not as extensive recommendations. But again, what are we going to do as a team to enhance our operations going forward? So that's my initial thought, is that we'll wind up putting together for the council a set of implementation strategies based on the recommendations contained in the report, and again, at two levels, fire department as well as the entire team.
I have specific questions. I think it might be for, is it? Yes. Vernon? So obviously, the city of Wichita's main departments regarding this report are Wichita Fire and Wichita Police, but more poignantly, this is about some of the procedures regarding the fire department. Can you talk about your most concerning, once again, key findings regarding what you mentioned were, what was it? So many policies, quote, were not followed. Can you talk about those?
So I'll do my best here to get to your question, but I'll come around the barn. When we did firefighter interviews, it's important, and I'm sharing this with you as the city. I didn't share this with the county, right? The city fire department is your department. When we did interviews, we interviewed, I think there was just over 40 firefighters that was at this incident that we actually met with and spoke to. And I want to tell you that I walked away from those interviews impressed by your firefighters. I think you have a very enthusiastic, committed, aggressive, and healthy group of firefighters. I engage with firefighters all over the world, actually. And I will tell you, I was impressed by the physical fitness and passion of your firefighters to serve this community. That's the honest truth. And I told these guys when we left those interviews. I also believe that there's a condition that exists within the Wichita Fire Department that is not unusual to some firefighters. In the fire service, we are the ultimate adapters and overcomers. And sometimes adapting and overcoming gets the job done, but it creates a pattern of siloed. We'll just do it ourselves. Everybody else is wrong and we only know, right? Because this is the conditioning in which we mitigate people's worst days. I think the components of aggressive and independent overcomers contributes to a very strong type A culture that requires a very strong presence of command and control. And I believe that the policies that were not followed in this particular incident that was identified were a result of those two components. You had firefighters that were aggressive, getting to scene and getting it happening, getting it going. And you had independent, free-bodied, adapt and overcome to whatever I see the moment of priority being, and a lack of strong leadership and command and control.
We also talked about humility. Can you talk a little bit more about culture? Obviously, you interviewed a lot of the firefighters. I'm concerned about the culture.
The nature of the culture in the business itself is aggressive. It's independent. It's problem solvers. And sometimes we have to check ourselves to be collaborators. I think one of the hardest things that I heard from a firefighter during the interviews, and it wasn't just one firefighter, it was multiple firefighters. When asked about why were you searching buildings uninvolved with the fire, repeatedly I heard, we thought somebody else was. There was not a culture of abandonment. There was not a culture of irresponsibility. It was a culture of assumption that somebody else was taking care of the priority, and they were coming in later into the incident and backing up the incident. But unfortunately, what was happening is that repeated, we just spread resources thinner and thinner from where our attention and priority operation needed to occur.
Maybe this question is for the city manager. What has happened since the incident regarding one of these recommendations, which is culture?
Mayor, that question's probably best answered by the fire chief. There has been, I think as a result of the Jensen Hughes work, there's been some more reflection on actions taken by the department, not just for this incident, but also in terms of command, incident command, and the need for, I think, a more aggressive incident command. But again, the chief can talk a little bit better about that than I can.
Morning, Mayor, City Council, City Manager. Yes, the Wichita Fire Department has instituted officer development, which encompasses A to Z, all the different aspects of leadership, of collaboration, of cooperation, of incident command, both on the fire ground, administratively, the whole gamut. We're in the early infancy stages of it. We have put one group of individuals through it to identify the gaps. We're currently working on those gaps, and the game plan is to provide that training throughout the department. That's one aspect of it. We're recently also working on our collaboration and partnership with our county partners. Started just an opportunity where we put, it's a program in which we've allowed some exposure to each other at our field level. We also started meeting on a weekly basis with our field supervisors and their supervisors, both from the individuals that have participated to this point, plus the supervisors, plus the directors. It's been phenomenal and opened up tremendous lines of communication. Those are the two things that we've worked on specifically at this point.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. And Chief, I might just add, when we're talking about cultural overall, and one of the comments from Jensen Hughes was that the health of our office, of our firefighters was noticeable during the interviews. Getting a head nod, I caught it right. And Chief Snow and President Bush with IFF 135 and I, and as well as other community partners, are working on creating a culture of wellness. And some of the things that we're trying to do regarding cancer screenings, sleep hygiene, other things that are contributing factors to the health of our firefighters so that they can serve, but then also so that they can be protected. And so I do think that, it's one more thing that's going to help the culture overall and help us maybe to, just make sure that we're addressing the needs of our firefighters. So thank you.
The other thing, Mayor Wu, I forgot was we've also implemented monthly training where we send the training out ahead of time to each one of the battalions, and then we bring them down unannounced, just randomly, And we have the battalion chiefs actually sit in and view the training. So they're observers, they're not actually involved in it. And that way then they can identify and see what we see as far as from the training division to help improve the skill sets of our firefighters.
Vice Mayor Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. You just answered a couple of the questions. Just they had mentioned about the policies and procedures that were showing concern about not being followed through. Can you address any of the training concerns that they shared?
Yeah, that's what we're doing through the monthly training. We identify some of the gaps that we have. And like I said, we put it out and then we give them a month to train on it individually, each one of those stations. And we just randomly bring them down and then we go through that. So yeah, those are different aspects. That's something that we've never done before.
I was going to say, was that prior to the fire, or you guys just started doing that?
We just started doing it afterwards.
Thank you.
Yes.
Additional questions from council members? See none. Thank you, Chief Snow, and thank you to the Jensen Hughes team. Moving forward, I know you mentioned the three major challenges of trusted collaboration, enhanced public safety systems, and the fire department culture and accountability. What are some, now that you've heard what Chief Snow has said about steps that have been taken since the incident, what additional things do you see the city of Wichita's fire department doing in order for us to regain trust and really have collaboration? Because I think one of the speakers mentioned there has been decades of animosity, and we need to move past grievances. How do we move forward?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this, that there really needs to be, after I think all parties, all agencies digest what we've said and have questions, it's definitely worthy getting department heads in a room together and maybe with us or not, and to discuss, to get past some of these things that were either thought to be true and not true, or not exactly what everyone thought they were, and start to work together. Again, I talk about benchmarking. The growth of the Sedgwick County Emergency Communications Dispatch Center itself and Emergency Communications. It's been taking in for years. Some of the smaller communities, both on the dispatch side, they've been giving up their own dispatch and giving it to the emergency communications. Emergency communications, EMS, they've been giving up EMS, and now they're handling EMS. I think we've heard from the fire department that, a lot of times they're going and attending to EMS calls and waiting for the county EMS. So there's opportunities to free up, possibly free up where the county may need some more EMS staffing and equipment to allow the Wichita Fire Department to focus more on firefighting operations than waiting on an ambulance, a transport vehicle to take a patient to a hospital or a shelter or something like that. So I think first, getting in a room of the department heads and then maybe one level down and starting to have conversation about these things, again, after this is digested. But there's definitely a lot of opportunities for reflection here, and then benchmarking against other communities elsewhere. We talked a lot about the siloed mentality. I feel like it has to do with geography a little bit. Like I said, you're the biggest. As part of Kansas, you're it. So reaching out as far and wide and making connections at all levels of the public safety system to understand what other people like Wichita and Sedgwick County are doing.
Thanks, John. Madam Mayor, it's not written so clearly in the report, but again, it's your fire department and this is the city council. So In my experience of exposure, I would say that there's great benefits through opportunities, specifically speaking of the fire department. Great opportunities in working with the Center for Public Safety Excellence through accreditation and credentialing. Credentialing of chief fire officers, and credentialing of the organization itself in general. And the reality is the actual designation or the accreditation component to me is not what it's about. It's about the extensive process of self-evaluation and organizational evaluation and the things that are learned through that process that makes you a better service to your community.
Thank you again to the team. I see no further questions from council members, so I will move to adjourn this special meeting. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? See none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much.